December the 7th, 1941, 7:55 a.m. The first Japanese bomb fell on Pearl Harbor. Within minutes, 8 American battleships were under attack. Most were caught completely unprepared. Crews scrambled to battle stations. Officers tried to make sense of chaos. Ships burned. Men died. But on one battleship, the guns were already firing back. USS Maryland, moored beside the capsizing Oklahoma, was shooting down Japanese aircraft while the world was still trying to understand what was happening. This is the story of the first American battleship to return fire in World War II, a ship that fought back from the first minute of the war and kept fighting until the last, a ship that turned survival into defiance when everything around her was dying. Maryland had been in Pearl Harbor since October. She was moored at Battleship Row Berth F5 with USS Oklahoma outboard of her. This was standard procedure, 2 battleships together, the inboard ship protected by the outboard one. It was efficient use of dock space. It also meant that if someone attacked with torpedoes, the outboard ship would take the hits. Oklahoma was Maryland's shield, though nobody thought in those terms. Nobody expected an attack. Sunday morning, December 7th, was supposed to be a quiet day. Reduced manning, liberty for most of the crew, officers sleeping late, the peacetime Navy routine that everyone had settled into. At 7:55 a.m. that routine exploded. The first wave of Japanese aircraft came in low over the harbour. Torpedo bombers headed for Battleship Row. Dive bombers targeted the airfields. Fighters strafed anything that moved. The surprise was complete, overwhelming, devastating. Most ships were caught with their anti-aircraft ammunition locked in magazines. Guns were unmanned. Crews were at breakfast or still sleeping. The Japanese had planned this perfectly. They'd achieved total tactical surprise. What they hadn't planned for was how fast some Americans would react. Maryland's officer of the deck saw the first planes. He sounded the alarm immediately. General quarters. All hands to battle stations. The bugle call rang out across the ship. Men grabbed their helmets and life jackets and ran. The ship's gunners headed for their weapons, not fully understanding what was happening, but following training. Some thought it was a drill. Others realized immediately this was real. The planes had red circles on their wings. Those were Japanese markings. This was war. The anti-aircraft crews reached their guns within minutes. Maryland had 50 caliber machine guns and 5-inch anti-aircraft guns. The ammunition was locked below deck's standard peacetime procedure to prevent accidents. Gunners broke open lockers, formed human chains passing ammunition up from the magazines. Officers screamed orders. Keys were found. Locks were broken when keys weren't available fast enough. The entire ship transformed from peacetime status to combat readiness in the time it takes to tell it, but those minutes felt like hours. Men were moving on adrenaline and training, doing what they'd drilled for dozens of times, except now the planes overhead were shooting back. Maryland's guns opened fire. The exact timing is disputed. Records from that morning are incomplete, confused, written later from traumatic memories. But Maryland was one of the first ships to return fire, possibly the first battleship. Her 50 caliber machine guns started firing at the attacking aircraft. Then her 5-inch guns joined in. The barrels elevated tracking targets, firing. Shell bursts appeared in the sky. Tracers arced toward Japanese planes. Maryland was fighting back. Outside Maryland's hull, Oklahoma was dying. Torpedoes slammed into her port side. 1 hit, 2, 3. The explosions were massive, felt throughout Maryland. Oklahoma's hull shuddered with each impact. Water poured into her compartments. She began listing immediately. 4 torpedoes. 5. The list increased. Oklahoma was going over. Men on her deck realized what was happening and started abandoning ship, but hundreds were trapped below. The ship rolled further. 6 degrees. 10 degrees. 20. Oklahoma capsized in less than 12 minutes. She rolled completely over, trapping over 400 men inside her hull. Maryland was 20 feet away. Her crew could see Oklahoma capsizing. They could see men jumping into the water. They could see the hull rolling over. They kept firing. This wasn't callousness. This was survival. Japanese planes were still attacking. More waves were coming. If Maryland's gunners stopped to process what was happening to Oklahoma, they'd be next. So they fired. They tracked targets. They shot down aircraft or drove them off. They did their jobs while their sister ship died beside them. The positioning that protected Maryland from torpedoes couldn't protect her from bombs. Japanese dive bombers came in from altitude targeting the battleships. Maryland's gunners engaged them, but dive bombers are difficult targets. They come down fast, release their bombs, and pull up. The brief window for anti-aircraft fire is measured in seconds. Maryland was hit twice by bombs. Both struck forward of the main battery. One penetrated the forecastle and exploded inside. The other hit near the bow. The damage was serious, but not catastrophic. No magazines exploded. No critical systems were destroyed. Maryland took the hits and kept fighting. The casualties on Maryland were relatively light compared to other ships that morning. 4 men killed, several wounded. 4 deaths is 4 tragedies, 4 families destroyed. But compared to Arizona's 177 dead or Oklahoma's 429 dead, Maryland got off easy. The 2 bomb hits caused damage that would require repairs, but Maryland remained operational. Her guns kept firing throughout the attack. Her crew fought back for the entire 2 hours that Japanese aircraft controlled the skies over Pearl Harbor. When the attack ended around 10 a.m., Maryland's immediate situation became clear. She was damaged but floating. Oklahoma was capsized beside her, trapping hundreds of men. Other battleships on Battleship Row were sinking or burning. Arizona was destroyed, her forward magazine having exploded. West Virginia was settling onto the bottom. California was sinking slowly. Nevada had attempted to get underway and was beached to prevent blocking the channel. Tennessee was trapped behind West Virginia and Arizona, damaged but still fighting. The American battleship force was wrecked. Maryland's crew shifted immediately from fighting to rescue. Oklahoma's capsized hull was right beside them. Men were trapped inside, drowning in compartments that had been above the waterline minutes earlier. Rescue parties from Maryland and other nearby ships grabbed cutting torches and started trying to get to the survivors. They could hear tapping from inside the hull, men signaling that they were alive. The race was desperate. How long could men survive in air pockets inside a capsized battleship housed days nobody knew? Cutting through Oklahoma's hull was agonizing work. The steel was thick, designed to resist shells. Cutting torches worked slowly. Each cut took time. The men inside were running out of air. Rescue teams worked around the clock, cutting holes, pulling survivors out when they could. Some compartments had air. Others were completely flooded. Some men were rescued after being trapped for over 24 hours. Others died waiting. The final count was 32 men rescued from Oklahoma's hull. Over 400 were already dead, or died before rescuers could reach them. Maryland's crew participated in these rescues while also dealing with their own ship's damage. Fire control teams worked to contain fires from the bomb hits. Damage control parties patched hull damage and pumped out flooded compartments. Medical personnel treated wounded. Everyone did multiple jobs because there weren't enough hands for the work that needed doing. The ship had to remain operational in case of another attack. Nobody knew if the Japanese would return. The first attack had been devastating. A second attack might finish what the first had started. The symbolism of Maryland fighting back mattered immediately. In the chaos and destruction of December 7th, most of the news was terrible. Ships sunk, planes destroyed, thousands dead. But Maryland had fought. Her guns had been firing while other ships were still trying to get to battle stations. She'd shot down aircraft, claims varied, but at least 2 confirmed kills, possibly more. She'd proven that Americans could fight back effectively even when surprised. That mattered for morale. It mattered for the narrative that would be built around Pearl Harbor. The attack was a disaster, but it wasn't complete helplessness. Some ships had fought. Maryland had fought first. The damage to Maryland required repairs, but she was operational within weeks. Temporary repairs were made at Pearl Harbor. She sailed to Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Washington for permanent repairs and upgrades. This was standard for all the ships that could be saved. Raise them if they sank, repair them, upgrade their anti-aircraft armament, get them back in the fight. Maryland left Pearl Harbor in late December and spent several months in the shipyard getting rebuilt. New anti-aircraft guns, improved radar, better fire control. She was being transformed from a 1921 battleship into something more suitable for 1942. The experience of Pearl Harbor changed Maryland's crew permanently. They'd seen Oklahoma capsize. They'd seen Arizona explode. They'd heard men dying inside Oklahoma's hull while they tried to cut them out. They'd fought back during the attack, but they'd also seen how quickly a ship could die. Modern warships, heavily armored and seemingly indomitable, could be destroyed in minutes by aircraft. That lesson was visceral and immediate for Maryland's crew. They'd survived because Oklahoma was outboard, pure luck, geography. If the mooring assignments had been reversed, Maryland would have capsized and Oklahoma would have survived. That knowledge sits differently when you've watched 400 men die 20 feet away. Maryland returned to service in February 1942. The Pacific Fleet was still recovering. Some battleships had been raised but needed extensive repairs. Others were total losses. The carriers were conducting raids trying to maintain pressure on Japanese expansion. Maryland was too slow to operate with carriers. Like Colorado and other old battleships, she was assigned to escort and patrol duties. The war had moved beyond battleships. That became obvious in April and May when carrier battles at Coral Sea and Midway determined the course of the Pacific War. Battleships weren't present, weren't needed. The war they'd been designed to fight wasn't happening. Maryland spent 1942 largely in frustration, training, patrols, convoy escort, waiting for missions that would let her use her main battery. Those missions came in 1943, when the Central Pacific Offensive began. Island invasions needed shore bombardment. Maryland's 8 16-inch guns could deliver that. Tarawa, November 1943. Maryland was in the bombardment force. She fired hundreds of shells at Japanese positions before Marines went ashore. The bombardment wasn't enough. Tarawa was heavily fortified, and the initial bombardment schedule was too short, but Maryland did her part. She would do this repeatedly for the next 2 years. Kwajalein, Saipan, Guam, Tinian, Peleliu. The list of islands grew. Each operation followed the same pattern. Bombard, support the landing, provide fire support during the battle, move to the next island. June 22nd, 1944, off Saipan, Maryland, was hit by a Japanese aerial torpedo. The torpedo struck amidships, causing significant flooding and damage. 31 men were killed. Maryland had survived Pearl Harbor with minimal casualties. Saipan cost her more lives. The ship's damage control teams responded effectively. Flooding was contained. Maryland remained operational and continued bombarding Saipan despite the damage. She eventually withdrew for repairs, but stayed on station far longer than most ships would have after taking a torpedo hit. This was the Maryland way. Take the hit, keep fighting, deal with the damage later. November 29th, 1944, off later Kamikaze attack. A Japanese suicide plane crashed into Maryland's superstructure. The explosion and fires killed 31 men and wounded 30 more. Damage was extensive. Maryland's superstructure was wrecked. Her after director was destroyed. She had to withdraw for major repairs that lasted months. The kamikaze threat was existential for old battleships. They were large targets, slow, and despite improved anti-aircraft armaments, they couldn't guarantee safety against an aircraft whose pilot was willing to die to hit them. Maryland shot down many kamikazes. The ones that got through killed her crew. April 1945. Okinawa, Maryland returned to combat for the final campaign. Okinawa was the bloodiest operation of the Pacific War. The kamikazes came in waves. Ships died regularly. Maryland's luck held through Okinawa, though she came under attack multiple times. Her gunners shot down aircraft. Her crew maintained their stations despite exhaustion and the constant stress of attacks. She provided fire support throughout the months-long battle. When the war ended in August, Maryland was still operational, still on station, still ready. The statistics of Maryland's service tell one story. She fought from Pearl Harbor to Okinawa. She participated in nearly every major Central Pacific operation. She was hit 3 times, 2 bombs at Pearl Harbor, 1 torpedo at Saipan, 1 kamikaze at Leyte. She suffered 66 men killed in action and numerous wounded. She fired thousands of shells at enemy positions. She shot down multiple aircraft. She was one of the most combat-experienced battleships in the fleet. Numbers don't capture the human experience, but they demonstrate sustained combat service under dangerous conditions. The crew of Maryland carried Pearl Harbor with them throughout the war. They'd been the first to fight back. They'd survived when Oklahoma didn't. Some crew members had been aboard during the attack and served throughout the war. They'd seen the transformation from peace to war in minutes. They'd experienced the worst surprise attack in American history. They'd watched men die. Then they'd spent 4 years fighting back operation after operation, taking hits and returning to combat. That's a weight that changes people permanently. Maryland's symbolism as first to fight back mattered in 1941 and continues to matter in historical memory. The attack on Pearl Harbor is remembered as a catastrophe, which it was, but it's also remembered as a moment of surprise that led to immediate American response. Maryland represents that response. While other ships were still trying to get organized, Maryland's guns were firing. While other crews were trying to understand what was happening, Maryland's crew was fighting. That doesn't diminish the disaster. It doesn't change the strategic situation, but it matters for how Americans understood their response to the attack. They'd been hit. They'd hit back. Maryland proved it. The relationship between Maryland and Oklahoma haunts the story. Maryland survived because Oklahoma was outboard. Oklahoma took 5 torpedoes that would otherwise have hit Maryland. Oklahoma capsized while Maryland fought. Over 400 men died on Oklahoma. 4 died on Maryland during the attack. The disparity is stark and arbitrary. Mooring assignments aren't about fairness or merit. They're about logistics. But the result was that one ship died while the other survived, and the survivors had to live with that knowledge. Maryland's crew rescued men from Oklahoma's hull. They heard the tapping from inside. They worked to cut through the steel. Some men they saved. Most they couldn't. That's a trauma that lasts. Maryland's post-war fate was similar to other old battleships. She was decommissioned in 1947. She'd served for 26 years from 1921 to 1947. She survived World War II with 3 hits and 66 killed in action. She was awarded 7 battle stars for her service. The Navy didn't need her after the war. The fast battleships, Iowa, New Jersey, Missouri, Wisconsin, would be kept in reserve. Old battleships like Maryland were surplus. She was sold for scrap in 1959. No preservation effort, no museum status. The ship that fired first at Pearl Harbor ended her life being cut apart in a scrapyard. There's an injustice to that ending, though. It's the practical reality of post-war naval planning. Maryland represented an earlier era. She'd been built under the restrictions of the Washington Naval Treaty. She was slow by modern standards. Her design was constrained by treaty limitations that no longer applied. The Navy was moving forward. Old ships, no matter their service records, were history. Maryland had made history on December 7, 1941. By 1959, history was something you read about, not something you preserved. The men who served aboard Maryland during Pearl Harbor carried their experiences for the rest of their lives. Some spoke about it. Many didn't. The generation that fought World War II was often silent about their experiences. They'd seen things nobody should see. They'd done things that needed doing. They came home and tried to rebuild their lives. The Pearl Harbor survivors from Maryland could say they'd fought back from the first minute. That was something. Whether it was enough to balance the memories of Oklahoma, capsizing of Arizona, exploding of the bodies in the water, that's for each individual survivor to answer. Maryland's story is ultimately about response under impossible circumstances. She was surprised. She was under attack. Her sister ship was dying beside her. Everything she trained for was being tested in real combat without warning. Her crew responded. They got to their guns. They fired back. They shot down enemy aircraft while bombs fell and torpedoes exploded around them. They took hits and kept fighting. When the attack ended, they shifted immediately to rescue operations. They did their jobs under conditions that would break most organizations. That's the real story of Maryland. Not just that she fought back first, but that she kept fighting despite the chaos and horror around her. The symbolism of being first matters because someone has to be first. Maryland's crew didn't know they were firing the first shots of American battleship resistance in World War II. They were just firing at enemy aircraft attacking their ship. The historical significance came later, but that significance is real. Maryland represents the American response to Pearl Harbor, surprised, bloodied but fighting back immediately. The attack didn't break American will, it hardened it. Maryland demonstrated that on December 7, 1941, at 7:57 a.m., roughly 2 minutes after the attack began, her guns were firing. She never stopped until the war ended. The technical details of Maryland's gunnery that morning are lost to chaos and incomplete records. How many planes did she shoot down? Estimates range from 2 confirmed to as many as 5 claimed. The exact number is less important than the fact that she was firing effectively while most ships were still trying to get organized. Her crew's training paid off. The drills they'd run dozens of times became automatic responses when the real thing happened. Muscle memory and training meant the difference between shooting back quickly and being helpless. Maryland's crew had both. The comparison to other Pearl Harbor survivors is complex. All the ships that survived had their own stories. California was sunk but raised. West Virginia was sunk but raised. Tennessee was damaged but fought throughout the war. Nevada attempted to get underway during the attack and was beached. Each ship's experience was unique. Maryland's distinction was being first to fight back and surviving with relatively light damage. That combination, effective, immediate response plus survival, made her story different. She proved you could fight back successfully, even when surprised. That lesson mattered for the fleet that had to rebuild after Pearl Harbor. USS Maryland served from 1921 to 1947. She was present at Pearl Harbor and fought in the first minutes of America's war. She participated in every major Central Pacific operation from 1943 to 1940. She was hit 3 times by enemy action. She lost 66 men killed in action. She earned 7 battle stars. She proved that American battleships could fight effectively when properly crewed and trained. None of that was enough to save her from the scrapyard. Ships are tools. When they're no longer useful, they're disposed of. Maryland was useful for 26 years. Then she wasn't. The legacy of Maryland is the legacy of immediate resistance. When surprised by overwhelming attack, when friends are dying around you, when everything is chaos and horror, you fight back anyway. You do your job. You follow your training. You shoot at the enemy until the guns run out of ammunition or the enemy runs out of planes. Maryland's crew did that. They were the first American battleship crew to fight back in World War II. They set the standard that every other crew followed. They proved that surprise doesn't mean defeat. Attack doesn't mean helplessness. The Japanese achieved tactical surprise at Pearl Harbor. They didn't achieve total victory because ships like Maryland fought back from the first minute. December 7th, 1941, 7:57 a.m. Maryland's guns opened fire. Oklahoma was capsizing beside her. Arizona would explode minutes later. The American Pacific Fleet was being destroyed, and Maryland was fighting back, shooting down Japanese aircraft, proving that Americans could respond even when caught completely by surprise. That's her legacy. Not the most famous Pearl Harbor survivor, not the most decorated, but the first to fight. That matters. It mattered in December 1941, when morale desperately needed something positive. It matters now, as we remember that even in the worst disasters, someone fights back, someone resists, someone proves that surprise doesn't equal surrender. Maryland was that someone. She fought first. She fought well. She survived. That's enough.